Hey, good morning. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on Thursday, right? How y'all doing today? Yeah. I just got to jump right into it. I got to reproduce my little opening music that you guys like so much, but got lost in the shuffle. And man, we just got to do some repairs. That's okay. We know how to do it. We know how to do it. How y'all doing today? Coronavirus, you know, thought we was getting better. Things are opening up. Then they start talking about the Delta variant, and oh man, it's just, just be safe, I suppose. Last weekend, I went out and about, and I went to 1, 2, 3 public gatherings, and had my mask and everything like that, fully vaccinated and everything like that. However, I got to admit, I was feeling some kind of way when I was out there networking and seeing my old friends and everything. I feel like we were safe, but at the back of my mind, I was like, ooh, it's just kind of crazy, right? Wow, what a great show we have for you today. Really, as you know, we've had several, live broadcast guests from South Africa, from Kenya, from Ghana, from Senegal. You know how we do it. We're global. Yes, Carla, I am brave to go to 3 public gatherings. It was an example of I felt like I was okay. I went out there to SoFi Stadium. I went over to an art exhibit, and I went out to VIP Records Long Beach community pop-up. And yeah, it was brave, but it was cool. And yes, I was feeling some kind of way. But, back to the mission at hand, we always are built about the business of building bridges of music, arts, and culture with Africa. And African America, it's important, right, that we just kind of bridge with our brothers and sisters all over the continent. And, we're all about that. We've had several broadcasts dealing with that type of work, right? And today is no different. I thought that I would bring a really high level broadcast executive for us so that we could examine this whole new paradigm of broadcasting. A lot of you all know I've been in the radio business for a lot of years, a whole generation. Left KJLH, Stevie Wonder's radio station, started my own media company. And those of you, thank you so much for following us. We have the Coffee Conversations with Greg J. We have the Afro Pop Radio podcast. We have the 24-hour online radio station. We're doing virtual events. We're creating new paradigms of broadcasting. And, to be honest with you all, every time, as an entrepreneur, you might get discouraged or something like that, and is this really working, And, man, then you read the headlines, and absolutely what we are doing here at the Dream Creator Studio, Hannibal Media Group, we're right on par. Listeners, you all are changing the way that you consume media. And today we're going to talk about this from a global perspective. And let me just get right to it and bring in a gentleman who I did not meet over in South Africa. He's from South Africa, but we happened to be at a conference a few years back. And I knew about his radio station that he was the head of, and I watched his presentation. I was like, oh man, I know that radio station. So I went up and just, met him, and we've been in contact. And I'm going to bring him in so you can understand the depth of professionalism that we are really, really talking about right here. Thank you, Carla. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Omar Essack. There he is. Good morning here, but good evening where you are, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah, it's about it's just past 6 p.m., 6:05 p.m. here in Johannesburg.
Wow. Well, I'm looking at you. The lighting is excellent. Now, Omar, I've only known you as an executive, but I was, fooling around on YouTube, and I see your news anchoring and everything like that. You giving the people the news. Wow. I was like, look at him.
That's right. I've kind of, I think I call it semi-retirement. I worked 30 years in the industry, most of it, running radio stations and then running a media organization here. And just as the pandemic was about to hit, decided to try and do a couple of things and have a bit more fun on my own. At my root, Greg, it's exactly like your roots. I'm a broadcaster at heart. Yes, I started as a radio presenter, as a radio DJ. That's how my life in media began. And obviously I climbed the ladder and got to run things as well. But being back at the coalface, anchoring on television, interviewing people like you do now, that's where the real fun is, man. That's in my DNA. I love that.
Yes. Now, I would like for you to share a little bit about. Okay, let's start with what is it called? East Coast Radio.
That's it.
All right. Talk about that a little bit, and then because I want the viewers to really get a sense of like how much of a senior broadcast executive you are.
Sure. Well, I started at East Coast Radio. Remember, this was a radio station in the dark days of apartheid in South Africa. A guy like me, I'm a brown person in South Africa. We would have had stations for brown people, Indian descent. I had stations for white people, stations for indigenous African people with different languages. And so it was to get through to work on a radio station that was for white people, because I couldn't work at the brown station because it did Hindi music and I didn't really get that, and I didn't know how to pronounce some of those words. So I got very lucky. I got an audition. I managed to get into East Coast Radio, and when I got into management, it was just at the time when I joined. It was at the time that Nelson Mandela was freed from 27 years in incarceration, February that year. And so things were starting to change in our country. And when I became a manager there at that radio station, that was after our first elections, right? So the first ever democratic franchise, free vote for every single South African was in 1994. It was momentous, April 1994. 2 years after that, I was at East Coast and then promoted to programming and then promoted to run the radio station. And my vision, the thing that drove me was, how can I take this East Coast Radio from being a station for white people into a station for what at the time you'll all remember Desmond Tutu called the Rainbow Nation. I wanted to create the Rainbow Station. Was it possible to make, at the heart of this station, was a music radio station. Could we use music to bring people together? Because they were always apart. They were separated by artificial barriers determined by skin color. And could we make East Coast Radio the first radio station in South Africa that brought Black people and brown people and white people all together? And we achieved that. In 1998, I became managing director of that radio station. By 1999, or June of 1999, we're a 1 million listener station. And for the first time ever in the history of this country, we had a radio station that brought Zulu people who spoke ethnic Zulu language speakers, people who had Indian descent, brown, and white people together on one radio station. It never happened before. So it was quite momentous. And that's very much part of my history. And it's probably when I think back and I reflect on my career, whenever anybody asks me, what's the thing you're most proud of that you achieved in your career? It was that. It was the first radio station that brought people together to have conversations with each other, unfettered by skin color. For the first time, people were talking, engaging, listening to the same music, finding something that was common to all of us. We all loved Stevie Wonder, everyone, white, Black, Indian, and that hadn't happened before. So there was music that was listened to prior to this. You were listening to a radio station that played music that appealed only to white people. Black people didn't like that song, didn't like the music. And so suddenly we changed the playlist and we started to do community engagement to bring people together around this brand. And East Coast Radio was the first in South Africa ever to do that. So it's something still that I think marks out my career as, the thing I'm most proud of, managed to do that. And of course, our country is going through all sorts of challenges all the time, like every country. It's not like racism is dead just because the Rainbow Nation was born after Nelson Mandela was freed. We have to grapple with that all the time. And we have to look for points of commonality. We've got to find things, issues, matters that we can align around and say, these values are what we care about as a South African nation, no matter what our color is. So it's not like after the Rainbow Nation was formed, all of these things fell into place and now we have a perfect society. Far from it. We have to work at it every single day. And media, radio, television, online, all of that is very much part of that crafting of a nation. Where can we find things that we find that we're commonly aligned around, rather than only the things that separate us and push us apart again. But it was a powerful moment.
Yeah, quite a feat, like Carla Thomas is saying there. Rhonda Love's checking in. Wow, what a great story, Omar. Great stuff. Like, let me ask you though. So, okay, East Coast Radio, that's good. I got it. I became a listener after seeing your presentation at the Worldwide Radio Summit where we met. Okay, right. So then you rose shortly after that. That the parent company was Kagiso. Am I saying that correct? Kagiso Media.
That's correct.
And
correct.
You rose to be what position in that company?
Well, I then headed up the radio division. So I was called the executive director broadcasting. So I was moved to head office, moved from Durban, that beautiful coastal city, which still has the warmest ocean. Well, one of the warmest parts of the world from an ocean perspective. You love swimming in there.
Because sharks in the water over there, Omar.
Yeah, but they still have nets, which I guess isn't great. It isn't great.
I went to the beach in Richards Bay, man, and the sign said, "Beware sharks."
But the water's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, very beautiful.
Yeah, the water's great. And then I moved up to Johannesburg, which is sort of a 1 hour flight up from Durban. And that's where the head office was. And we were growing our radio network. And so my CEO at the time, Roger Jardine, made me in charge of growing our radio operations. And that's the role I took on. And we brought on more radio stations. And then I worked very closely with various other people to sort of, change formats, improve stations that were underperforming. And that was my job. My job was to make sure that all of the radio stations under our umbrella were successful, were profitable, were connected to their audiences, were growing. And it was incredible time, very exciting time. And we worked with a lot of, Greg, really, really amazing people from the US as well, putting in place market studies. I don't know if this name means anything to you, Greg, but Mike Dawn is one of those guys who loved coming to South Africa and working with us. He was so invested that he sort of charged us rates that he doesn't charge anywhere else in the world because he wanted to be there. He wanted to be there as our world was changing in South Africa. He said, I want to be part of that. So he flew down and he worked with us, and we had a couple of other people because we were learning the game. So as radio presenters, we didn't understand, the nuances of programming, what it takes to manage a station effectively. I mean, I think we had an idea from the economic side and the financial side what was necessary, but there was so much that we needed to learn about programming and formatting. And we were very fortunate at the time that the leadership around us connected us to the global community of people who'd done it, been there, got the T-shirt, whether in the US or Canada and Australia. As South Africans, we were so eager to reach out and learn. We're very hungry, curious, wanted to be the best at this game. And so we were very fortunate. We had people to hold our hand, teach us the tricks of the trade, and we learned quickly. And then we started to do smart things ourselves as well. We broke boundaries. One of the things that always amazed us was there was, when we looked at the US, there was, African-American radio, Hispanic radio, and we were breaking through that and saying, no, it doesn't have to be stratified that way. Yeah. Can't we find something that just brings us together? And it doesn't matter that we speak different languages. Can we come together in music, as it were? So it was a great time. Wow. And so that's what I did. So I moved up to Kagiso, grew the radio portfolio. We moved from one station. Eventually, we had 6 stations under our umbrella. We were only allowed to own the majority stakes in 2 of them. And the rest of them were sort of minority stakes. But because we were sort of the experienced radio operators, we managed the other stations as well. And they became part of our own sales house as well. So we sold them as a collective. And that's what I did. I managed essentially the entire radio portfolio.
Wow, that's great stuff. Now, then I was, a friend of mine. You may remember her name. Non Bota is a very good friend of mine, and I met her actually listening to Kaya FM here in the States, and. While I was sitting at my desk listening while I was working, she would be on the air. So I just started exchanging tweets with her. Then when I came over on one of my visits, I was able to meet her. We've remained friends ever since. And so I came over to South Africa, and every time I come, she said, "Oh, you must come and get on my radio show." So I come and I study the new radio station she's on. She's on 702. And I learned, who do I see is the president and CEO of the company that owns 702, my good friend Omar Essack. Man, Primedia. Oh my goodness.
That's right.
Huge company.
Yeah. Very definitely big company with its fingers in multiple media assets, not just radio, but also outdoor media, second largest outdoor media company in South Africa, with a significant footprint in the rest of Africa as well. So they're in 6-7 countries across, in Nigeria, in Kenya. We pulled out of Kenya, but we were there at one stage. Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola. So various other countries, outdoor network. And then we also have, at Primedia, we had an in-store marketing arm, and we had cinemas. So when I was running it, obviously we'd sort of hived off the cinema, and it was being run by same shareholders, but a different management team. So essentially, when I was the group CEO of Primedia, it was the phenomenal radio assets. It's the first time I'd actually run talk radio assets. So they have spoken word radio, talk radio, which is really exciting in a country like ours, when you've got a democracy that's only, let's call it, in its youth. We're literally 24, 25, 26, 27 years old. We're a young democracy compared to where you are, Greg. There are a lot of conversations that need to happen about how to make this democracy vital, how to preserve it, because Mandela fought for it all his life. How do you sustain it and make sure it doesn't become a tyranny? How do you make sure that people are asking and challenging each other tough questions, keeping people accountable? That's what talk radio does. So it was very exciting for me to be in charge of talk radio stations in Cape Town and Johannesburg. And then, of course, they have very good music radio stations in Johannesburg and Cape Town as well. It was great fun to do that. And then also learn so much about running an out-of-home outdoor business and in-store media business. So it was quite varied. And it was a tremendous 2 to 3 years that I had, working in a sort of much broader media environment.
So now you said semi-retired.
Yeah, I'm one can never, I'm in my mid 50s. I'm delighted and excited about doing the sort of things I'm doing. I have more control of my time. So throughout my career in working for shareholders, your discretionary time is very limited. You're constantly working on strategy, working on budgets, working on challenges that are emerging all the time. The world has changed. One of the themes we're going to talk about today is how technology has changed so much in our world as media owners, as media operators, as radio owners and operators. All of that means that you're never sitting in, when you're reading your bedtime story to your daughters as they're growing up, the moment you shut that book and they're fast asleep, you're back in front of your laptop. And you're seeing, well, what else is changing? How am I approaching tomorrow? How am I approaching next year? How am I approaching the next 3 years? What challenges do I need to be aware of? And how am I repositioning the business to be fit for those challenges, to succeed despite whatever comes our way? And so you're never really able to have control of your time in the way that I have now. Now I'm in a very fortunate position after having worked for 30 years in media, to be able to say, this is what I want to do. So the television guys approached me and said, hey, this was in September last year. It took me a long time to make the decision to finally go back on air. But in September last year, they approached me and said, hey, man, would you come on and work with us back on television again, do some anchoring on the weekends. And, we had a long conversation. I wasn't so sure about whether I should get back in. And then in May, they sort of really pushed me hard, and I said, okay, let me give it a shot, see whether I have fun. And I'm having a tremendous amount of fun doing it, and particularly the interviews, because again, like I say, with the current affairs interviews, it is asking the authorities, why are we doing this with vaccines, or why don't we have those vaccines, or how are we helping save lives? You're keeping them honest, and there's a lot of responsibility in that.
Yes,
but if you're a journalist, or you're someone who works in news, you understand that your most important responsibility is to represent the voice of the people who can't ask these questions of their leaders.
That's right.
The only time they get to make a change in government is when they go and vote. Apart from that, they can protest, they can march, they can demand certain things. But whether that change happens, it usually only happens at the ballot box. And so a journalist, an anchor like me, we have a chance to ask the tough questions of those in leadership. Why are you making those decisions? And are those decisions that you're making now in the best interests of the people of South Africa? So it's a great responsibility, but it's also a hell of a lot of fun being back in front of the camera and the microphone. I'm enjoying doing that. And then I'm working for there's a Paris-based company. They've started a really nice an online magazine called Red Tech, which I support them on the strategy side and the business development side. And what we do is we look for interesting stories from across the world of radio that will resonate for people in Canada, Australia, because the primary subscribers are Canadians, Australians, US, Brits, and European radio owners. For example, in our last issue, the May-June issue, we did a story from Delhi in India. And you know what's happened in Delhi 2 months ago. It was a catastrophe with the coronavirus, the Delta variant. And they ran out of oxygen. They had no beds. A lot of people passed on, gave their lives during this virus. And so we talked to a radio station at the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic in India, in Delhi. And we asked them, well, how did you cope? What did you do? How did you keep your society, your community? How did you keep them informed? How did you help them in their most difficult, most challenging times? And it was an amazing story written by the group programming head, who told us how they first encountered coronavirus when one of their own people suddenly collapsed in his workplace.
Wow.
And that's how the virus came to them. And then when they had that second wave, which was so devastating, so catastrophic, what did the radio station do? How did it help its people? So it was an amazing story that he wrote. And that's how we connect radio people across the world, because we can all share in knowing their story might have been more challenging, more difficult than ours, but we also went through similar stuff. And so that's what the magazine does. It tells you stories about what's happening with radio in Malaysia or Indonesia or Kenya or Nigeria or Washington. So the point is, our stories come from all over the world, because we all realize, Greg, you and I know that when we meet each other, the thing that binds us is that in our core DNA, we're radio people. That's where we began. Right. That's what we love. That's our passion. And so we always look out for each other. That peer group, if someone calls me from anywhere in the world and they work in radio, I want to know more about what they do. Hey, man, I'm happy to share with you some of my, and that's what I experienced. As a young radio guy, I could reach out to anyone, anywhere in the world. And they said, hey, you're in radio, you're a brother. As long as you're in this medium, we're connected. And what do you need? What do you need? How can I help you?
Yeah, right.
And that's exactly what we want to, that's what we want to keep going. It's an amazing medium.
Yeah. Okay, so now here we are. I mean, fundamentally with technology, the way we came up, how we do the art form is fundamentally different now because of technology. If I'm a radio presenter, I need to be on every digital platform out there. I just need to be ever present. If I'm a radio station brand, I need to be everywhere, like everywhere. How have you seen the progress or the adaptation that radio stations have made in this new digital space? And I'd like for you to address, how do radio stations now, how has the advertising business shifted along that technology road?
Sure. So it's exactly what you're doing right now, Greg. I mean, you're on Facebook Live, but at your heart, you're still a broadcaster. it doesn't matter how you go out. You use every possible distribution that's available to you to get your message out, whatever it is. So the coffee conversation we're having could be on an FM station, simultaneously on Facebook Live, at the same time streamed on any number of podcast distribution opportunities that exist. And that's what I guess has opened up for all of us. There was, you'll remember 5-7 years ago, there was fear that potentially as FM guys, well, thinking about how our primary distribution was FM, were we under threat? Were we going to be like what we were seeing with cord cutting, with Netflix coming and fewer people watching television? Was radio going to go down the same road? But I think we needed to, and we did, so many of us did, in our own heads, in our own minds, we decided our business is not radio. Our business is telling great stories using this medium, audio primarily, and using every distribution opportunity that arose to make sure that we reach more people. And if our content is fantastic, as so many podcasters have shown, if our content is great, people will find us. It is, or at the end of the day, it's about how well we understand how to emotionally resonate with somebody on the other side, listening or watching. It doesn't matter. But if we're good at this craft, we know how to tell amazing stories. We know how to describe things in ways that are evocative and get the senses going for the listener. It was always at the heart of radio that if you could do that well, if you had a way to bring people in with you, trigger their imagination as you speak, they will always find that you will find that they will stay with you because they're fascinated and interested in the way that you tell stories, in the way that you engage. And that's really what's happened. Our medium, at the heart of it, has to be fundamentally about those things. It's just that distribution is now, the options are significantly greater than they ever were. FM is one part of our way of communicating. It's one way of distributing, but the internet has opened up so many other options for us. And I think that, that trepidation and that fear is warranted in one way. Is that how do you keep your talent who now can go off and do things on their own if they want to? How do you say to them, but I want you in the Prime Media circle, or I want you in the Kagiso circle. Can you stay with me? Because you need to now. So there was a time when Kagiso and Prime Media and, name any radio group in the US, iHeart, whoever you want, Cumulus, because they paid the fees to own that spectrum, your only way as Greg was, if you don't work for those radio stations, you didn't have a way to connect with audiences. Yeah, because they had the airwaves, as it were. They owned that bit of spectrum in that city, and that was part of their way of getting to the audience. And so Omar and Greg had to work for Prime Media or wherever else you need to work in order to access audiences. That doesn't happen anymore. If I am good enough, I know that I can go out and start doing my own show, set up my own podcast, build my own personality, with my personality, build my own fan base, and I'm a media business. So that, of course, is fundamentally how things have shifted. We talked about it with the internet, right? With Twitter, it was the democratization of voice. Anyone could say what they wanted to and have an audience. And Trump, sorry, I know that might be a swear word on your show, Greg, but he proved that he could work around media and get to people and get a massive following and say whatever you want. And sometimes it wasn't even true, but a lot of people believed it because of, the idolization of a particular individual. So there are risks and dangers here too. But if you're a responsible broadcaster, the point is you now have the ability to be a media company on your own. And I think that challenges companies like Prime Media and Kagiso and Cumulus and whoever to say, well, what is the incentive for someone who's really amazing at what they do, to come and work in my ecosystem? Why should they come and work with me? Why won't they just go ahead and do it themselves? And so I think more and more the question for a lot of top talent, the Joe Rogans of the world, is big checks bring them in. And so they say, well, I'm happy to be part of the Spotify ecosystem. Or can I get a piece of ownership? I mean, can I own the value that I bring? Because previously you gave me a salary, but I ended up helping you make huge profits from
That's
advertisers. And I perhaps never sniffed any of that unless you had a scheme that allowed me to share in it. And I think that's how technology is changing things. It's democratizing this medium to a point where, Greg, you can do what you want. You can set up your own media company. You don't have to work for a Cumulus anymore. And you've got that fan base that loves and knows what you can do so amazingly well that they stay with you, they support you. And then the advertisers come, or it's a subscription basis. And that's what that's how it's changed and revolutionized our way of working and our way of being as broadcasters.
Certainly, I really love the freedom and love the, the freedom and the ability to really, really create that theater of the mind that you were talking about. That's what that's what we say, the theater of the mind. And, here, with Coffee Conversations, we just want to share stories from all over the world. It all came about just, we got on lockdown and quarantine, and we also sell and import coffee from Cameroon, West Africa. So I said, let me just try to sell some coffee, or something, and have these coffee conversations. And, but it really has taken off. And you're right, creating our own paradigms, not really having to bow down to the powers that be, the iHearts, the Cumulus, and all of those guys. Not taking anything away from them, but certainly we all now have new opportunities as broadcasters to create whatever the heck we want to. We say what we want to say out here, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, now how do we get advertisers there, Mr. Omar? Let's talk about this for a minute here, because even as independent media people, we're still the small guy. We're knocking on the advertising agency door or the sponsor's door, and we're getting kicked around a little bit. But when I talk to my people who work in the iHearts, the Cumulus, and even independent FM signals, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, now I'm not getting an annual buy anymore, or they're not buying my million person cume. It's more segmented in terms of the buys that are coming down. What kind of strategies do you think we should employ? How do we approach that to get the advertising dollar?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, the more content that there is, the more choice that there is for listeners, the more fragmented the attention is, the harder it is to reach people, right? So we all know when there were fewer options, it was easy to reach. That's why when we go back to sitcoms in the old days, the audiences were massive. Just the fragmentation is huge. So the more fragmented it becomes, the more valuable, there's no question, we all know this, the more valuable it is to know more about who these people are and how they behave. So the ugly way to do that for some time now, for the last 10, 15 years, has been, cookies that you didn't even know about were tracking you throughout your behavior online. And you hadn't given anyone permission to do that. So that's not a great business model, because it's subterfuge. It's not with your consent. And you had no idea that you were being tracked and followed and sold. You were being sold by a company that never asked you if they have your permission to do so. And so we go right back to saying, it's a good thing that there are now, there's so much emphasis on privacy. There's so much emphasis on consent. There's so much emphasis on saying, do you want to participate in me and you engaging, or you giving me your fandom and me knowing more about you? I want to ask you, if you're part of my fan base, may I ask you more about your behavior? May I ask you more about how you buy, what are the things you're interested in? And the more we understand these segments of people that are part of our audience, and we've always had them, but we've treated them as a conglomeration. It's just numbers. It's 50,000, it's 500,000. And we know that, to be honest, it's very hard to compete with the global mass platforms, the Facebooks, the Googles. And so the best strategy for those of us working in smaller markets is a really deep understanding of context and content love. What do people, what really gets people going? What are they interested in? But also context, right? What are they doing at particular times or parts of the day? Because as their mood changes, as their behavior changes, as what they do is different, even in the pandemic, I'm in the office right now. There's, what do I want to listen to when I'm busy working in my home office? What do I want to engage with when I've read my bedtime story to my daughter? Is very different from what I was interested in at 9 a.m. in the morning in my office.
Sure.
So the more we understand what people are doing from a contextual point of view, what is their behavior? What are they up to right now? And therefore, what kind of content best suits them? And if I understand these sorts of behaviors, and people are more willing to share with me because they trust me, I think the number one word now, it always has been, but it's never been more important than today, is trust. Can I trust Greg? And if I trust Greg and I give him my support and my audience, my ear, my attention, because I trust him, I love what he does, and I believe that he will be responsible with me and as his fan, then perhaps I'm willing to share more information with him about me. Because I understand he's got to find a business. The truth is, everybody, me, you, whoever's starting this, it's about a business model, whether it's you pay to listen to Greg or advertisers support Greg because I'm listening to Greg. Greg and I, as his audience, have got to have a mutually beneficial relationship. He must understand what value, I know what value he gives me, Greg, but what value can I bring to Greg? And newspapers like The Guardian and others, that's how they're reaching out to people. They're saying, look, we give you great information every day. We have to pay for these journalists to deliver that information. And our information is rigorous and trustworthy because we ask the hard questions. So we're not just doing this to be populist, or we're not just, serving stuff that gets, we're not doing clickbait. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So if you appreciate what we're doing, please support us. So more and more media companies are saying, for our business model to work, we're either going to put a paywall in and say, well, if you want that information, you have to pay to receive it, or we work on the basis of mutual benefit. You get something good out of the engagement that I provide, or the content or information I provide. In return, how can you support me? And so I'm intrigued by that model, and I think it's a great model. So and if we're thinking about the global biggest from a scale perspective, doing that is Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia will say to you, this is the global commons. Everybody contributes. We then make sure that the information is verified. How are you contributing to sustain us? Because at some point, if we can't get $10 from you every 2 years or whatever, it's sort of the NPR model as well, right? It's sustained because the community says, I get so much value out of you, I'm willing to make sure I contribute, I donate. And I think increasingly, the better we are at winning trust, at having the credibility, at delivering content that people say, I am delighted with that information and I know I can trust. When Greg tells me something, I trust that it comes from a place that Greg's checked it out. We've just had a story in South Africa where there was this journalist who published a story about a woman giving birth to 10 children.
I saw that.
Yeah, and he hadn't verified it.
Decuplets.
Decuplets. Thank you. Thanks for correcting my pronunciation. And I'm in the country and I don't know how to say it right. But he went out and he believed her, or I don't know how that worked out. And then it just ended up being a huge story, even globally.
Yes.
But he hadn't verified. Now, what does that do? It immediately breaks trust. It breaks trust with that brand, with that journalist, with that publication. So trust is the number one currency as platforms proliferate, as options proliferate. And that's, if you get that and more people trust you, then that trust matters and means something. So an advertiser then says, that audience, look at them. They're consistent. They're there. Greg understands them. They're willing to tell him more about themselves because of that trust, because they understand that at the end of the day, we must be honest and transparent about our business model, in my view, Greg.
Sure.
We must say, I can't have next week's podcast because I don't have enough money to sustain I can't buy a loaf of bread tomorrow. So guys, if you like what I do, so those that thrive must be those that deliver on their promise, that build trust, that the fans respect, and then the fans have to come to the party. They've got to say, yeah, of course I'm willing to share information. I'm willing to tell you what I need at between 9 and 10 a.m. and how that's different from what I need at 7 to 8 p.m. And this is, if you give me this, then I'll give you my attention. So there's got to be a symbiosis here, in my view, because otherwise it's just too fragmented. And the old way was just collecting the data without permission. That was wrong. And so today you've got to say, give me more information. Here's an incentive for you. I'll give you more of my show free. I don't know. We've got to figure this out. It's not, the answers are not all, the answers are not all super clear, because the environment changes all the time. And it's less and less about just mass scale without knowing who you're talking to and why it matters.
It's interesting. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm, just kind of analyzing, listener supported is a really strong way to go, especially if you have loyal listeners. Sometimes broadcasters, especially online broadcasters, are a little, skittish about asking for money on their broadcast. Then there's the whole thing is, you wonder, people may have that trust and they want to be loyal, but will they go ahead and make that investment to send the donation, to your media company? And, these are the things that we wrestle with, just trying to figure, figure it all out. And we haven't come up with the answers yet. Is it good to have, what do you think about having both? So listener supported and sponsor supported?
Of course. We must work with every possible model, because we don't run businesses that thrive in an environment where there's so little. It's not like we have so little. Everybody is competing today, from every platform, every media, every personality. And so when you build this relationship of trust and you have the loyalty of your fan base, I'm saying that more transparency, much more, because the other way, where you have less transparency, leave that to the politicians. We want to be trusted media people. And so our engagement has to be one where we say, hey guys, are you enjoying what I'm doing? I want to keep doing it. Next week, I want to do this show for you. It's going to take 16 hours of research to be able to give you answers about whether that vaccine is the right vaccine, or is Big Pharma, hoodwinking us with whatever it is. It's going to require my time and an effort from a team of people that we have, but I can't pay that team unless, and I think more and more of that, more honesty, more, clear engagement that says, this is how this stuff works. If I can't pay these guys, I can't give you that kind of info. I can't deliver that. And I'm of the view that the world is ready for that kind of engagement, because I'm seeing it more and more. And I see that people are willing to reach into their pockets to support Wikipedia. And I see that people are willing to reach into their pockets to say NPR is worth keeping. And that's why I will contribute, because I would be less well informed. I would be poorer from access to good, trustworthy information if this was gone. And then, of course, you had the other end of the spectrum, where it's all about populism. So what can we do now to get the advertisers to support us, to grow that audience? I mean, the Fox News phenomenon, the right wing and the left wing on both sides, the polarized sides, that are really just looking to be sensational all the time. That also exists. And you have to take a view. You have to take a view about which is the model that best suits your own value system. So at the end of the day, I think it's got to be driven by the values. So Omar's values might say to him that he doesn't want to just go to the lowest common denominator and just push a line just to get a big audience and make money. That's not part of what drives him. Then he has to have a different approach. I'm not saying that shouldn't exist. There's a place for that. Clearly, there is.
Sure.
And it's why to quote to look at what Joe Rogan does when he does all the UFO stuff. I'm super interested, because that's an area that with one part of my brain says, is that real? I want to know.
Is that real? Right.
And he gets in there and he's doing this over and over, because he realizes that's a magnet for a certain part of his community, and they come rushing in, and fantastic. But like I say, ultimately, it's about what drives you. What is your value system? And you will always find people who want the two extremes, right? The left or the right, and driven by populist sentiment. Guys doing their shows and being extreme and calling out people and willing to rubbish others and throw people under the bus, and they have a great time. You remember in the old days, who was that guy who used to do these shows where he would bring trailer park people and have these insane stuff going on television? What was that? Who was that guy?
Oh, that Howard Stern.
Well, Howard does some crazy stuff.
On TV. Oh my goodness! So Phil Donahue, Jerry Springer,
right?
Jerry Springer, Maury, all those guys. Oh man, I saw Jerry Springer still on TV.
There was a market for that, right? So they just did the lowest common denominator stuff and saying, "Man, this is trash talk. Let's just go deep into the trash."
In the African American media audience, there is a number. When I was listening to Nielsen, and they were saying the number one television show among television shows among African Americans were The Love and Hip Hop and The Real Housewives of Atlanta, and that's just some foolishness on there, but people really love it.
Absolutely. And as Greg builds his empire, as Greg J builds his empire, part of his empire can do that stuff. Yeah. Greg doesn't have to, right? Greg's brand says, well, these are my values and these are the sort of conversations I'm going to have. But in my empire, in Oprah's empire, there's a place for this and there's a place for that. It depends on what your mission statement says and what your values say. What can you support? And how do you want to build your, and all of these, there's enough of an audience for all of these different streams. And the question for you is just, what suits your values best? Yeah. And you must know that on that basis, if your values are, I like to do the extreme crazy stuff, and that's all I'm going to focus on, you'll find an audience for it. You just got to be the best at that, and you got to be consistent at it, and that brand's got to be, shouting loud and clear, this is what we're about. And so I know where to find you when I'm looking for that kind of stuff. Yeah. And that, I think I've seen it spoken about and written about in dozens of papers now. In a world like we are in right now, the cost of marketing is 1,000 times more than the cost of actual content. There's more money spent on marketing because the attention span is so fragmented, everybody's attention span. So try and just get someone to know that you exist is probably one of the things you invest most in right now. And sometimes that means the content, not enough is being invested in the content. And that's a dangerous game, that you spend more on talking about, what exists than in actually developing the good stuff that you want to engage on. And that's a worry. We've got to find a better balance between the two. And that's why these tentpole action movies, right? They're just driven by huge amounts of media spending to say, it's the next Captain America and stuff. Yeah. And where are those good, heartwarming stories? Maybe they're coming back. I think the pandemic in some way got us all back to seeing something like Nomadland, which was, what a powerful story that was. Yeah. And that might not have seen the light of day or seen as many people or got noticed in a different world where you went to the theater and the IMAX and you're only interested in, big buildings falling apart and superheroes flying through the sky. Yeah. We need those great stories to come back.
Yeah. So very interesting. It's so funny. I'm sitting here thinking about, hey, who could I get to come on here and just be off the charts? That's a good one. You need somebody.
You need that. Why not? Why not?
Why not? That's right. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. So now as we're doing this, so we're content creators, we're making these adjustments for the new paradigms. Are the advertising agencies also making the adjustments, or don't we have a duty to go and, I guess, educate them on all of these strategies that we're discussing right here?
Yeah.
Or do we just expect them to know it already?
Well, the big risk is that more and more ad agencies get into purely real-time bidding and automated buying. So you're just constant. You've got these machines, these algorithms, just looking for these audiences are the ones I want. Where can I get them cheapest? I mean, there's a risk in that.
Yeah.
That's risky for media owners, media creators, personalities, presenters, owners, because it's just constantly just saying, okay, so where is this audience? How quickly can I find it, and how cheaply can I get it for? And if the world moves into a purely automated buying sort of environment, the big gorillas, I think, are likely winners, right? I think it's the Facebooks, because they have the scale and the balance sheet to be able to fragment and segment audiences and fragment content and attention in ways that you and I can never do. And of course, you're doing this on Facebook Live anyway. So in a sense, you're helping them grow, but also hoping that part of that, their scale comes to you as well. So maybe you get a piece of their audience. But that is the risk. If it's entirely automated, I think what we have to realize, and maybe the pandemic has taught us this, is that one-to-one human connection, where I can go and say why I think there's value in what I'm doing, and there's value in this audience. And why is it that this audience will spend more time with me or give me more of their attention? And therefore, that's good for these sorts of brands. That's another thing. I think as we think about the advertising environment and the advertising customer, you can't, Greg, you or me, if we're running something, we're not a show for every single client, every single brand, every single customer. We're not based on the way our program works, based on the audience's values and our values aligned, it means that we can't sell toothpaste and, I don't know, name something else. But we can't be the same.
Motor oil.
Perhaps. We can't be everything to everyone. We've always, that's like a fundamental lesson from media. You can't be your audience. If you're doing a show about bringing up baby, that's a particular type of mindset that's come into that show. It's a particular type of audience, which means it sells. The best thing to sell there is a particular range of products and brands, not motor oil, for example, to use what you said. And I think that's the opportunity. If you fully understand your engaged audience, you understand them well enough because your communication is open, transparent, honest, you're learning, you're benefiting from them. They're feeding back to you. They're telling you what they're about, what they're interested in. Then when you go speak to the advertiser, you say, these are the sorts of people I represent, or that come to my show. Their values are aligned with mine. Yeah. This is them. They're in this age group, but not just age. This is how they behave. This is what they buy. This is what's important to them. I mean, just thinking about broadly about the investment markets right now, this whole thing about ESG, right? Responsible investing for companies that care about the environment, that care about society, that care about governance. That's, I think, a hallmark of how the world is shifting. So I think back again, when we talk about how we sell audiences, we sell them, in my view, we sell them on the back of, these are the values that matter to them. You want this audience, they care about these sorts of things. This is how they spend their day. This is where they want to spend their money. This is what matters to them. And then if you can shape that and draw out clearly a descriptor of these people whose values align with yours and with the show, then you go to those sorts of advertisers and you say, if you want these sorts of people, this is where you'll find them. And they're interested and they're engaged. And you need to be talking to them. Why aren't you talking to them? If you are this kind of business, then you also align with these values of these people and myself and my show. You should be advertising here. I'm not saying it's easy to do. That's the last thing I'm saying. But what I am saying is, at the end of the day, you've got to find what the distinctive characteristic is of the people who are fans of your show. What are their distinctive characteristics? And do you have enough of them? And are they properly engaged with your show? Then it means that if a brand comes in that understands those values and also aligns with those values, they should walk away happy. They will see results because their brand aligns with the show's brand, aligns with the presenter's brand, aligns with the audience's brand. So all of us are connected around a particular value system. And I think that's where we're heading. Potentially, that's where we're heading. And that's what I'm hearing when I see this ESG thing and I see more people interested in protecting the environment. And not everybody. Some people don't care at all, right?
Right.
And that's
I
fine.
want to.
There's a place for them.
I want to rewind to something you mentioned. We were talking about Facebook, and yeah, they have a lot of control over how this program gets out to the masses of the people. We started out by, spending the money to, advertise. They call it boosting, and we were gaining a lot of views, in that way. But then we started getting blocked. Now, I have a problem with it. And it really is very serious. I'm going to just go ahead and keep it real, because I feel like they were saying they were blocking us because our content was about social issues. And this was, I think they were trying to counter what was happening with Donald Trump. I think that's what I'll give them that pass. However, they made it very, very difficult for us to get back into having the ability to promote our shows and make the investment to promote our shows. And it's then when I look at it, okay, social issues. All right. Last year, as an example, right after the murder of George Floyd, the music industry, a lot of record companies removed the descriptor of Black music. It used to be called urban. They removed that from the lexicon of record company jargon. Back in the day, when I first started, it was the Black music division. It was Black music, it was soul music, And so a lot of us veterans were saying, we never named it urban anyway, and it was a discussion. So I had a very renowned record executive come on. And this guy's got skillions of records under his belt. He's very highly respected. And we were reminiscing about how it used to be in our industry over the years. And they blocked that one. It's like, wait, we were talking about Michael Jackson. You know what I mean? It's really, really crazy. Then there was another one where last year, Juneteenth became a big deal. The independence, the news that the slaves in Texas were emancipated, came 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. You know all about that. So we were just asking a person, how do you celebrate Juneteenth? Facebook blocked that one. And it was just really, really weird how their algorithms, if that's what it really is, blocks us from our ability to promote our shows and promote our content. How do we communicate in a better way with Facebook? Or is this just intentional? Are they really controlling the voices that we have across the globe?
Yeah, I think, we've got an example right now in India, in Nigeria, where governments are saying, we don't like the fact that Twitter has prevented, the governments are saying, well, our leader was talking about X or Y. You got unhappy about that, and you pulled his speech down. So I was speaking to a Nigerian journalist about that, and there were two perspectives. On the one hand, they were angry that people were being silenced, and therefore the voice of people who want to say what they want to say has been pulled off in Nigeria and Twitter's banned. On the other hand, someone was saying, well, hey, shouldn't we be creating our own platforms? As Africans, why are we so reliant on these guys using their value system to decide what we can and can't say, when we can say it, when we can't say it, what is right, what is wrong? Mm-hmm. So there are two perspectives here. And I think that there is, of course, there is a lot of power vested in these massive platforms. And I think they're caught in the headlights. Let's be honest. They're deer in the headlights right now because they don't know which way to act, right? On the one hand, they get, when January 6th happened, and at the Capitol, it was insane. And for a lot of stuff, incendiary stuff was being said and then had to be pulled down. So the guys are always kind of behind the curve. So perhaps they're being preemptive. And what that leads to when they're behind the curve and then they get slammed for it, because how could you allow that to happen? Look what it led to. I think they become, they're under so much scrutiny that perhaps they make decisions and they're no longer sure about whether to allow this or not. Because the truth is, when you're in the space of content, moral decisions driven by morality, whose morality, whose objectivity, whose truth, all of those are not questions you can answer. There isn't such a thing as pure objectivity. There isn't. It doesn't exist. Whose truth is it? People have different truths, sadly. Verifying things take time to determine, is this legit, or what is the intention, what is the purpose? Nobody knows the purpose or intention of someone. You can put a headline in and it sounds like an inflammatory headline, but actually what you want to do is have a deep, engaging conversation about this issue because it matters to society. But your headline might have been inflammatory. And so immediately they just, the algorithm looks at the headline and says, got to take that down. And it makes no sense at all, because that's not the content of that engagement. Wouldn't have been inflammatory. It would have been a deep, honest discussion that would have probably led to a lot of understanding between people at different, of different perspectives, different shades. So yes, algorithms are blunt instruments. Even human beings who have to make a decision on the spur of the moment, hey, do we allow that, don't we? Under the kind of scrutiny that they're under because things have gone wrong, perhaps make decisions that are blunt because nuance is missing. Nuance is all about, okay, now I've got to really pay attention. Is this something that should be allowed? Let me listen in on that conversation. They shouldn't be doing that anyway. Right. They shouldn't be listening in all the time anyway. I think it's a very difficult space to be an editor. And I think that's what they're learning very quickly. Platforms are learning that they can't keep calling themselves just platforms. They are media. They are media. They mediate engagement, content, and conversations that are happening globally. And they have far greater responsibility as a result of their role as a media platform. And so it is, anyway, it's a fascinating time to be alive. I don't think there are hard and fast answers. We're learning all the time. It's like the scientists with coronavirus, right? There's this whole controversy. Fauci said, don't worry about a mask. Then he said, put on a mask. And then you listen to an interview and he says, well, my understanding and data informs me and things change. And I think it's the same with wherever we are in the world. Let's forget the fact that we have this one answer and this answer is a perpetual answer for all time. It isn't. Our views must evolve as we learn more, as we engage more. So if I had a view about X at a particular time, it doesn't mean I have to hold it for the next 50 years. New information arrives and I must be able to amend, evolve, and change and say, no, that was wrong, actually. This is more appropriate for this circumstance. And that's what the Facebook has to do. That's what Google has to do. That's what all of our operators have to do, is they have to change because we're changing. Society is dynamic. Communication is dynamic all the time.
Well, Omar Essack, it's been a great time this morning, man. I could stay on this call with you all day. I love this dialogue that we're having, and thank you so much for your perspectives. Anything you want to say to the people? Any last things you need us to know before we depart?
There are probably quite a few things, but someone might be sitting on the other side who might be a media person and saying, hey, man, there's this values thing. It's so out there. What about real practical examples? I'm telling you, if you have the trust of your audience and they love you, you pick up the phone to 100 of them and you say, hey, man, when are you in the market to buy tires for your car? In the next 6 months? Fantastic. Go to the tire dealership and say, 15 of the people who listen to me are going to be changing their tires in the next 6 months. You should be talking. You're a tire dealer. You should be talking to them because they've got lots of choice. But if you come onto my channel, I'm just trying to give you a practical example. When you link up and you have trust and people believe and they engage and they say, me and you, we're in this together. I'm your fan. What do you need from me? Then you can pick up the phone and say, man, tell me, I want to get some nappies on there. Have you got babies? How many babies in your household? How many of them need nappies? Which brand are you buying right now? Those conversations, those commercial conversations can start because they trust you. So that's a practical example. It's not I'm sorry, I'm not being philosophical. I just wanted to say that once you have trust, once you have value alignment, once you have fans who care about what you do, you can get information from them that allows you to have a practical solution like this around advertising and go to a sponsor and bring them on board. About the world, I think, the world of broadcasting, I have no clue how what the world will look like 10 years from now. People will ask me, is radio dead? I think it's very hard to say. I think about my own behavior. Of course, I listen to, if I want to, the Beatles or the Beach Boys or Stevie Wonder when I want to through a streaming service. I think from a music streaming perspective, I do both, right? But I think the one thing that talk radio has, spoken word radio has, that does give it longevity is community conversations. I really think that the future is bright. I know there's Clubhouse and I know there's conversations happening on other media, but local radio that has conversations that matter to local communities, that's there forever. It might not be on radio. It might be on different media. It might be on Facebook Live, although we shouldn't give all our stuff over to Facebook and make them the dominant gorilla in the room. That doesn't make sense to me. So those conversations are so important, so critical. The conversations in a small town need to happen in that small town with that small town presenter. And this, I think there's a bright future. And the problem with podcasts right now is they're not live and they're not interactive. And that's what FM still has, is right? Live interactivity in the moment. That is so powerful.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because even here, I mean, I'm just resigned to the fact that the juice of audience size is in the on demand. So like right now, we have a couple people listening to us live and engaging with us, but then by supper time, there'll be a few hundred, or thousands, however it goes, right? And so people are needing to get to the content on their own accord, right? So that's what I've learned in this thing, Let me ask you this before we get out of here. So what's the, because here in Los Angeles is the #2 media market in the United States, right? There's a lot of online broadcasters. I mean, a lot. And if the industry has always fascinated me. There's people who are personalities in their own community just because they do Facebook Lives or Instagram Lives and all of that. What is over there in South Africa? Is online radio, is that big? Is it growing? Are you seeing that type of explosive growth?
Maybe explosive is not the right word, but is growing. So more and more personalities who were previously on talk radio have started podcasts on their own weekly. They have fantastic intellect. They're damn interesting to listen to. And so they are building, slowly but surely building a fan base. So I think, more and more people will take the plunge once they see how successful and sustainable certain personalities are. And I think that's the big question right now is, do I make this jump? Let me watch how that guy is doing it. He's just begun. Can he keep it going? If he can keep it going and he can find support and advertisers, then maybe I'll take the jump. It's a little harder here than say in the US because of the cost of broadband, because all of those, those podcasters that go start doing this on their own, when you want to listen to them, if you don't have, unlimited fiber, uncapped broadband, etc., it's costing you to listen to them. So there are too many impediments right now that don't exist in markets like the US and other developed markets for people who want to do this on their own. Once that impediment goes away, and this is like electricity in your home, you just plug it in, you pay the cost, even it doesn't matter. And we've got a very poor society, as you well know. Millions of people unemployed, and the pandemic hasn't helped. More and more people have lost jobs. We don't have helicopter checks in this country, which means if you lose your job, you're on your own. You're trying to find a new hustle to just get enough money to feed your family. This is not a priority. Even though you love that particular personality, I don't want to go spend another $50 or $100 to buy airtime to listen to him. I can't afford that. I need the bread and milk. So I think we've got too many other challenges right now for this to be flowering in the way that it is in the US. I think once we get past those challenges, once government once broadband becomes ubiquitous and cheap, it will become an opportunity for all of this talent to be able to be heard whenever you want on your phone device. People have got the device, but the cost of listening is an impediment. And I know right now I'm talking to a couple of people who want to do this. And what we're saying is, if the network operator can zero rate the broadband, so it doesn't cost you to listen to this personality and this personality and this personality or this talent, or our version of Joe Rogan or whoever it is, then more people will come. It will be a magnet. It will draw people in. But right now it's a cost. And so you'd rather listen to FM. It's free. Even though you might not have the person you want to listen to there, they've left it and they've gone on and they're doing something on their own. There's too many constraints.
Sure.
That's the problem.
But
we'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there. All right. All right. Hey, I want to help. Come on, let's go. How can we get to you, Omar? How can the people reach you?
Oh, well, let me see. I'm on LinkedIn, which is where you see a lot of the stuff I do.
Yeah.
Omar Media. I think it's just Omar Essack. If you type in, you'll find me. So LinkedIn is probably my primary way of, putting my content out there and engaging with people. I have Instagram, I have Twitter, Omar Essack or Omar Media, but I'm not very heavily in there. LinkedIn is my primary, to be honest with you. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing on the weekends that's getting onto YouTube. So if you type in my name, Omar, my surname Essack, and ENCA, which is the channel, you'll see all of the interviews I do. So that's one way of that's one way. That's one probably quick way of finding me. But apart from that, I am on Twitter, Omar Essack, and you can reach out to me just by DMing me or whatever. But my primary is probably, I would say, LinkedIn, which is where most people engage with me. And I think that comes from being a corporate guy for so long. That's probably why that's my number one medium. I haven't broken. I haven't broken free. I haven't taken off the shackles of being a corporate guy and an executive. I need to do that. Be a regular person now. Come on.
Be a regular person. How you doing? Just fine. Just fine. Thank you so much for joining us on Coffee Conversations with Greg J. And I mean, it is a tremendous honor to have you here. I mean, and I know for a fact with my own eyes, just you are really a Hall of Famer in broadcasting, particularly in Africa, on the continent. And I really am, honored by the work that you have done. I honor you for the work and celebrate you for the work that you've done. And just want to keep, linked up and exchange ideas, with you and see how you never know what can happen, just to kind of link up and grow and elevate our craft as broadcasters. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for asking me, Greg. It's a real privilege to be asked. I was humbled to be asked. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for the time. And thanks for having coffee with me. I appreciate it very much.
Yes, you got a deal. Yes. Okay, you guys, you know where it is. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. That's that Facebook page. It's also on Beach City Radio. It's on YouTube. It's on, where else? We're going to go beachcityradio.com. You'll be able to find that a little later. We're going to repurpose the audio and put it out there in the podcast land, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, iHeart, Spreaker, Apple, Google, just type it in. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. You'll see it as it's out there. And thank you so much for your support. Next week, you know what? I wanted to talk today about, before I caught Omar, I wanted to talk today about, 4th of July is coming up this Sunday. And we just had Juneteenth, right? And, now, we kind of conflicted now in our thoughts. And I think that maybe later on tomorrow, a special edition of Coffee Conversations, I'll play just the speech by Frederick Douglass that says, "What to the Negro is the 4th of July?" It's a very profound speech made back in the days of Frederick Douglass, but the words ring true for us as Black people in America. And I think that that's what we're going to do maybe tomorrow. But in the meantime, hey, man, look, be safe out there if you're, celebrating, if you're traveling. Those fireworks are a dangerous thing. It blew up a LAPD truck this last night. Did you all see that? Wow. So illegal fireworks all over the place. Just be careful. We got the pandemic going. Lots of crime happening out here. Now now that things are opening up, you're getting on planes, you're getting on the road to go visit your family. Just be careful and keep God in it, okay? And love one another. Love one another. Love one another. Peace and blessings, y'all.